I wish you were my son, he said quietly, his eyes meeting mine with a sincerity that made my blood freeze in my veins. In that moment, the conference room seemed to collapse around me. The ticking wall clock, the polished mahogany table, the skyline view of downtown, all of it faded away. There was only his face, the face that had haunted my nightmares for 24 years, and those 6 words that finally shattered the professional wall I'd built. My brother Benjamin shifted uncomfortably beside him, rolling his eyes with that familiar arrogant smirk I'd come to despise over the past 3 months of working with them. Neither of them knew who I really was. Neither of them recognized the 6-year-old girl they'd abandoned at Oak Ridge Children's Home on a cold October morning. I took a breath, steadying my trembling hands beneath the table. This was it, the moment I'd rehearsed in my mind 1,000 times since discovering they would be my clients. "I'm not your son," I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions inside me. "And you gave up the privilege of having me as your daughter the day you left me at that orphanage." The color drained from his face so quickly I thought he might faint. Benjamin's smirk vanished, replaced by wide-eyed confusion. For 24 years, I had imagined this moment, but nothing prepared me for the raw reality of finally saying those words aloud. 3 months earlier, Harrison Construction. I stared at the case file on my desk, my fingers frozen on the manila folder. The coffee I'd been drinking turned bitter in my mouth. "Did you say Harrison Construction?" Janet, my assistant, nodded. "Mr. Peterson assigned it personally. Said it needs our best corporate restructuring attorney, and that's you." She gave me a curious look. "Is something wrong?" I forced a smile. "No, nothing. Just surprised by the scope." I kept my voice casual, professional. "When's the initial consultation?" "Tomorrow at 10. She placed the preliminary documents on my desk. "Apparently, they're in serious trouble, multiple lawsuits, contract breaches. Mr. Harrison and his son will be here." After she left, I pulled out my phone and with shaking hands, found the photograph I kept hidden in a password-protected folder. It was the only image I had of my birth family, scanned from the original I discovered during my search 10 years ago. A newspaper clipping from the business section. "Harrison Construction celebrates 25th anniversary." There they were. My father, Charles Harrison, looking stern and important. My mother, Elizabeth, elegant but somehow sad around the eyes. And my brother Benjamin, maybe 17 then, with that entitled expression already forming. I was absent, of course. By then, I'd been erased from their family narrative for over a decade. "Why now?" I whispered to the empty office. After all these years, after all I'd accomplished, Harvard Law, making partner by 30, building my own family, why did my past have to crash back into my life now? I should recuse myself. That would be the ethical thing, the professional thing. But something deeper and more primal took hold. Maybe, after all this time, this was my chance to finally prove my worth to the family that had thrown me away. First meeting. The conference room felt too small and airless as I waited for them. My navy suit, the one Mark called my power armor, suddenly felt restrictive. I'd spent the night reviewing their case files instead of sleeping, memorizing every detail, every failure, every mistake they'd made. Their company was in serious trouble. Multiple lawsuits from contractors, unsafe working conditions, breach of contracts. Years of negligence and arrogance had finally caught up with Harrison Construction. When they walked in, I almost expected some cosmic recognition, a flicker of awareness in my father's eyes, perhaps. But there was nothing. To him, I was just another lawyer, a stranger hired to clean up his mess. "Danielle Morgan," I introduced myself, extending my hand across the polished table. My father's grip was firm but distracted, his eyes already scanning the room as if looking for someone more important. Benjamin's handshake was limp, disinterested. "Let's get right to it," I said, opening my folder. "Your company is on the verge of collapse." My father's expression hardened. "That's an overstatement. We've weathered downturns before. This isn't a downturn, Mr. Harrison. It's a catastrophic failure of management and oversight." I laid out the documents one by one. "You have 4 active lawsuits, including a serious workplace injury claim that could bankrupt you if it goes to trial. Your contracts are poorly drafted, leaving you exposed. And your finances. I paused, meeting his eyes directly. Frankly, they're a disaster. Benjamin scoffed. Who do you think you are, talking to us like that? A memory flashed, my 6th birthday, Benjamin proudly showing off his new bike while I received nothing because girls don't need expensive things. I pushed it away. I'm the person you hired to save your company, I replied evenly. And if you want me to succeed, I need honesty from everyone in this room. My father studied me, his expression unreadable. I wondered if some part of him, some unconscious corner of his mind, recognized something familiar in my face. My mother's eyes, perhaps, or the stubborn set of my jaw that mirrored his own. Fine, he said finally. What do you suggest? I outlined my strategy, keeping my voice professional despite the turmoil inside. Every recommendation I made was calculated not just to save their company, but to show him, exactly what he had thrown away. Night reflections. That night, after putting our daughter Lily to bed, I found Mark waiting in the kitchen with a glass of wine and that concerned look I knew too well. You're taking their case, he said. Not a question. I nodded, accepting the wine. I have to, Danny. He took my free hand, his thumb tracing my wedding band. Are you sure this is healthy? After everything they did. That's exactly why, I interrupted, the words spilling out faster than I intended. All these years, I've built this life, this career, trying to prove something to people who didn't even care enough to keep me. And now they've walked right into my office, needing me to save them. Don't you see? It's almost. I searched for the word. Poetic justice? He offered. I smiled faintly. Something like that. Mark had been my rock since law school. He understood my drive, my perfectionism, my need to excel, all rooted in that abandoned 6-year-old's desperate need to be worthy of keeping. He'd never met my birth family, but he hated them with a quiet, steady passion for what they'd done to me. Just promise me something, he said, pulling me close. Don't lose yourself in this. Whatever happens with them, whatever closure you're seeking, remember who you are now. Remember what matters. I rested my head against his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent. I know what matters, I whispered, thinking of Lily sleeping upstairs. They can never take that away from me. But as I lay awake that night, memories I thought long buried resurfaced with painful clarity. My mother's face as she led me into the orphanage, her eyes avoiding mine. It's just for a little while, she'd said, her voice trembling with what I now recognized as guilt, not sadness. Be a good girl. My father hadn't even come inside. He'd stayed in the car, too cowardly to face the daughter he was discarding. I'd waited by the window every day for months, certain they would return. They never did. The shifting dynamic. Over the following weeks, something unexpected began to happen. As I guided them through the legal minefield they'd created, my father's attitude toward me gradually shifted. The dismissive tone softened. He began to listen, really listen, when I spoke, occasionally nodding with something that looked almost like respect. Simultaneously, his patience with Benjamin visibly frayed. My brother's defensive excuses and lack of accountability, traits my father had apparently indulged for decades, seemed to suddenly grate on him. If you'd been paying attention to the details from the start, we wouldn't be in this mess. He snapped during one meeting, cutting Benjamin off mid-excuse. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, a complicated mix of emotions churned. There was a bitter satisfaction in seeing my father finally recognize Benjamin's failings, yet also a strange, unwanted empathy for my brother. I remembered the crushing weight of our father's expectations and disappointments all too well. After the meeting, I found Benjamin alone in the hallway, staring out the window with uncharacteristic stillness. He's always been like that, I said, surprising myself by initiating conversation. Benjamin glanced at me, something vulnerable briefly visible beneath his arrogance. Not with me. Not until now. He turned back to the window. Growing up, he was different. More patient, I guess. But ever since Mom died last year, he trailed off. The news of my mother's death, delivered so casually, hit me like a physical blow. I'd imagined confronting her someday too, asking why she hadn't fought for me, why she'd let him send me away. Now I never would. I'm sorry about your mother, I managed, the words feeling strange on my tongue. He shrugged. Cancer. It was quick, at least. He paused. You remind me of her sometimes. The way you don't let him bulldoze you. The comparison sent an electric jolt through me. Did some part of him recognize me on some level? Or was it just coincidence? Before I could respond, he straightened, armor back in place. Anyway, I should go. Dad's waiting. I watched him walk away, thinking about the parallel lives we led. Him raised in privilege, but under our father's critical eye, me abandoned but free to become my own person. I wondered, not for the first time, if he knew about me at all, if they'd ever told him he had a sister. The mother's secret happened during week 6 of the restructuring. I was reviewing old company records in a dusty storage room when I found it, a small leather address book tucked between financial ledgers. My mother's elegant handwriting filled the pages. I nearly set it aside until a business card slipped out. Callahan Investigations. On the back, in her hand, read Danielle, continued search. My heart pounded as I flipped through the book, eventually finding entries that made my breath catch. Oak Ridge, no records released. St. Catherine's Academy, dead end. Harvard Law, promising lead. She had been looking for me. Recently, persistently. Tucked into the back cover was a sealed envelope addressed to me, never sent. With trembling fingers, I opened it. My dearest Danielle, it began. If you're reading this, I've finally found you. There is so much to explain, so many years to account for. What your father did, what I allowed him to do, is unforgivable. I told myself it was temporary, just until his business stabilized, until his parents passed and couldn't influence him. I told myself many things to sleep at night. But the weeks became months, and months became years, and the lie became too big to undo. I sank to the floor, letter clutched against my chest, silent tears streaming down my face. She had looked for me. Too late, too many years wasted. But she had tried. The knowledge didn't heal the wound of abandonment, but it complicated my narrative in ways I wasn't prepared for. That night, I showed Mark the letter, watching his expression change as he read. She was going to tell him she'd found you, he said finally, pointing to a passage. She was building up the courage. And then she died, I whispered, and took the truth with her. He looked at me with gentle eyes. Does this change what you want to do? I considered the question, genuinely unsure. The clear line between villain and victim had blurred. My mother had been complicit in my abandonment, but had apparently spent years regretting it and trying to make amends. My father, had he known about her search? Had he forbidden it? Or remained willfully ignorant? I still need the truth, I said finally. All of it. But maybe. I hesitated. Maybe the ending doesn't have to be what I imagined. The revelation. It all came to a head on the day of our final meeting. The restructuring was complete, the lawsuits settled or in mediation, the contracts rewritten, new compliance protocols in place. Harrison Construction would survive, though significantly diminished. My father and Benjamin were already seated when I entered. For the first time since our initial meeting, my father stood briefly as I approached, a small gesture of respect that would have meant the world to me once. I think we all owe you our thanks, he said, his voice gruff as I took my seat. You've done extraordinary work. Benjamin crossed his arms, clearly less enthusiastic. Let's not get carried away. We're not out of the woods yet. I ignored him, focusing on the documents before me. No, you're not, I agreed. But you're on the right track. This restructuring has given you a fighting chance if you follow through. I outlined the final steps they would need to take after our professional relationship ended. My father listened intently, nodding occasionally. I could tell he was genuinely impressed with my work, and the irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter he discarded had become the savior of his precious company. As I began gathering my documents to conclude the meeting, Benjamin leaned back with a familiar sneer. Well, I guess even a blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes. Before I could respond, my father slammed his hand on the table. Enough, Benjamin. His face flushed with anger. That's enough from you. Benjamin looked startled, unused to being the target of his father's disapproval. My father turned to me, his expression softening in a way I'd never witnessed before. His next words changed everything. "I wish you were my son," he said quietly. The room went silent save for the ticking of the clock. 24 years of pain, of questions, of striving to prove my worth, all of it crystallized in this moment of bitter validation. He valued me, respected me, but still couldn't see past his own prejudices. I stood slowly, no longer able to maintain the charade. "I'm not your son," I said, my voice steady but resonant with emotion. "And you gave up the privilege of having me as your daughter the day you left me at that orphanage." The color drained from his face. Benjamin's confusion was total, his eyes darting between us as he struggled to process my words. "You didn't even have the courage to come inside," I continued, years of suppressed words finally breaking free. "You made Mom do it alone. I waited by that window for months, watching for your car. I thought you'd come back when you realized your mistake. But you never did." "What is she talking about?" Benjamin asked, his voice uncharacteristically small. I turned to him. "They didn't tell you? About the daughter they abandoned? The one who wasn't worth keeping because she couldn't carry on the precious Harrison name?" Recognition dawned slowly in his eyes. "There were rumors. Grandma once mentioned, but Dad always said it was nonsense." My father seemed unable to speak, his hands gripping the table edge. When he finally found his voice, it was hardly more than a whisper. "Danielle." He spoke my name as if testing it, searching my face with new eyes. When did you? "I made partner at Morgan and Peterson 3 years ago," I interrupted. "When Janet assigned me your case, I should have recused myself. But I needed to know if you would recognize me at all." A bitter laugh escaped me. "You didn't." I took a breath, steadying myself. "I found Mom's notes. Her investigation files. She was looking for me." My father's eyes widened. "Elizabeth was," he stopped, something like shame crossing his features. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," I said. "You never wanted to know. It was easier to pretend I never existed." Benjamin stood suddenly. "I had a sister all this time, and you never told me?" His voice cracked with unexpected emotion. "All those years I thought I was alone with you and your impossible standards." He broke off, turning to me with eyes that reminded me painfully of my own. "Did you know about me? Growing up?" I nodded. "I knew I had a brother. I used to imagine what you were like, whether you would have stood up for me if you'd been older when it happened." Something passed between us then, a moment of connection, of shared understanding about the man who had shaped both our lives so profoundly. I turned back to my father. "I saved your company," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. "Not for you, but because I needed to prove to myself, not to you, that I could rise above what you did to me." I gathered my belongings, emotions surprisingly steady now that the truth was finally spoken. "We're done now. The firm will send your final invoice." As I reached the door, my father's voice stopped me. "Danielle." There was a rawness to it I'd never heard before. "I was wrong. About everything." I turned, studying the broken man before me. For so long, I'd imagined this moment as a triumph, a final victory in a battle he didn't even know we were fighting. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of vindication, grief, and unexpectedly, a strange sense of release. "Yes," I said simply. "You were." I left then, walking past the offices where I'd built my career, past colleagues who had no idea of the personal revolution that had just occurred. Outside, the spring air felt cleansing, as if I'd emerged from a long hibernation. Epilogue. "Mom?" Lily's voice pulled me from my reverie. "Is he really my grandfather?" 3 weeks had passed since the revelation. I looked across our backyard at my daughter, so perfect at 7 years old, so secure in her place in the world. Mark stood by the grill, watching our conversation with supportive eyes. "Biologically, yes," I answered carefully. "Whether he'll be a grandfather to you in any real sense, that's complicated." Benjamin had reached out the day after our confrontation, his tentative text message opening a door I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through. We'd met for coffee twice since then, awkward, halting conversations as we tried to make sense of our shared history and separate experiences. My father had sent a formal letter, delivered by courier. 6 pages of explanation, justification, and finally, in the last paragraph, a simple apology. Too little. Too late. Yet something in me couldn't completely dismiss it. I'd like to meet him, Lily said, with the directness only children possess. And Uncle Benjamin. I've never had a grandfather or an uncle before. Mark joined us, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. That's up to your mom, sweetheart. It's her decision. I looked at my daughter, this miracle who had shown me what unconditional love truly meant, and saw myself at her age, waiting by that orphanage window. The cycle of pain could end with me. It had to. We'll see, I said finally. Maybe someday. Later, as Mark and I cleaned up after dinner, he asked the question I'd been asking myself. Do you think you'll ever forgive him? I considered this, washing a plate with methodical care. Forgiveness isn't a moment, I said slowly. It's a process. I'm starting to realize it might be more for me than for him. He nodded, understanding as always. I don't need him to be my father anymore, I continued. I built a life without him. But maybe. I looked through the window at Lily, reading peacefully on the porch swing. Maybe there's room for something new. Something with boundaries and expectations that I get to set this time. Mark smiled, drying his hands before embracing me. That sounds like the Danielle Morgan I married. Always finding the path forward. I leaned into his embrace, thinking about the long journey from that abandoned little girl to the woman I was now, a wife, a mother, a successful attorney, and finally, the author of my own story. The pain of the past would always be part of me, but it no longer defined me. Tomorrow, I would call Benjamin. Maybe in time, I would even meet with my father. Not for his redemption, but for my peace. The future, with all its complications and possibilities, was mine to shape. And for the first time since finding that case file with the Harrison name, I felt truly, completely free.